So a little while ago, I had an idea to try and tackle an entire sewing project in only 20-minute intervals. And this is partly because I have a disability, I have an energy limiting condition, which means I can't sew for long periods of time anyway. But at this particular moment in time, I also had developed a neck injury, which has significantly reduced my ability to sit upright and use my upper body. But I'll be honest with you, that project never really got off the ground because I quickly discovered that I hated it. I hated that small burst of sewing. I seem to spend so much time thinking and organising and preparing and then getting almost nothing done that it really didn't feel efficient to me. But a lot has changed since then, so I think it's time to give it another go. Because this is a concept that, if it does work for me, would be brilliant. So I'm not ready to give up hope just yet. So I put the project away in this bag over a year ago and I haven't looked at it since. So I can't remember anything about it other than what it was I was making. So the first step is just to turn out the contents of this bag and see where we are. Wish me luck. Oh, okay. So first of all, the pattern. So I bought this pattern off Etsy and it's by an independent designer that I hadn't heard of before called Sewillow. And it's called the Alchemilla Rain Cape. So here you are. I've got a printout to sort of give you an idea. And there's all the details of Sewillow. But the reason I wanted to make a rain cape now, as many of you know, I am a wheelchair user, an ambulatory wheelchair user. So that means I can stand and walk for short distances, but I use a wheelchair for energy management, for pain management. It's sort of a preventative for me. And it means I can do a lot more and I can go a lot further distances than I would on foot. I also live in England. It rains a lot. And usually when I'm using my wheelchair, I'm outside. And being in a wheelchair when it rains is a horrific experience because if you think about it, when you wear a coat as a abled person, I guess, when you're sort of standing up, even if you've got a hood, even if it's sort of a decent length, the rain is kind of hitting you and running off to the ground. Whereas when you're in a wheelchair, that rain is not only hitting you on a much larger surface area, but it is then all pooling in your lap. So you end up with a very soggy crotch. And it's a horrible, horrible feeling. And they do sell specialist rain garments for wheelchair users, but they look like this. And quite frankly, as much as I dislike having a soggy crotch, I would choose that over looking like that any day. And maybe that's my own internalized ableism, but still, I saw this and I thought there must be a even slightly more stylish solution. I mean, come on, at least can we make it not look like a bin bag? So I was looking at coat patterns and I wondered maybe if I could make like a vintage style raincoat, a sort of fit and flare princess coat out of waterproof material. That is still something I'm considering doing. But that's not very wheelchair friendly either because you just end up with so much fabric that you're sat on. That's kind of uncomfortable. So when I saw this sort of cape, you can belt it in, but you can also wear it loose. And I thought that's a really good solution for me and my needs because if it starts to rain really heavily and I want to protect more of my knees, I can sort of unbelt it and make it more tent-like. But if I sort of just want to wear it sort of fashionably, I can just belt it in and it's a lot more flattering of a silhouette. So that was the motivation behind choosing this project. And it's the sort of thing, I've needed this new raincoat since before I bought this fabric and started this project. And I've been hanging on buying another one because I'm determined to finish this project. But I've never really, my motivation and everything hasn't really come together on this, like I say, because I was trying to make it fit this 20-minute thing that I was doing for the video. But I have just booked, me and Woody and Sagan are going on a canal barge holiday this summer. And the thing about canaling is that you have to go through locks. It means that you're outside during the British summertime, which as we know is no guarantee of fine weather. And so I finally am motivated to make this because I need a coat. I need a good raincoat to go on holiday in Britain, and I've got all these pieces here in a bag. It's finally time to start putting them together. So it looks like previously I've ticked off where I'm up to. Look at me being that organised. So I'm up to lay the two opposite front pieces, right? So I've got all the pattern pieces here, all scrunched up. Did I mark anything up? It looks like I did, and it's faded away. So that's good. Oh no, look, there's some balance marks still on there. So first of all, my neighbour's doing yard work. So I've been through everything and everything is here, which is brilliant news. A lot of the pieces are quite creased and I don't think I can iron this fabric because it's waterproof. It's not an oil skin, but it's an oil cloth, which I got from Cloth Kits. They have an online store, I can leave you a link, but I believe the fabric is actually made by Merchant and Mills. So if you're looking for something similar, I know Merchant and Mills supply internationally as well. The lining fabric is flannel. So I've been sat here trying to read the instructions, and it's one of those things that I think I remember why I got to this point and didn't want to do it anymore. There he goes with the strimmer again. As I was waiting for the neighbour's gardener to put away the power tools, I went back and found the footage from over a year ago when I started this project. I didn't cut the pattern pieces myself. I delegated to Woody and supervised from a comfortable chair. That meant that I started my first 20-minute session with everything cut, marked up and ready to start sewing. Or so I thought, as the first few steps on the instructions were all about cutting fabric for the belt and trimming various pattern pieces to have a front and a back neckline. I started by cutting the fabric for the belt from my remaining fabric. The pattern advised cutting the belt 80 centimetres longer than your waist measurement, but that would have meant I would need a seam in the belt to add on a tiny piece at the end. So I just cut the belt to be the width of the fabric and will have to cope with a slightly too short belt. I chalked out the cutting line and cut using my spring-loaded scissors. No rotary cutters for me because of my previously mentioned neck injury. This is going to be very approximate because that edge is much wobblier than I first realised. I then had to find the sleeve pieces. A lot of the pattern pieces on this project look very similar, so it took me a while, but then I had to cut the neckline to have a front and a back, following the dotted lines indicated on the pattern. For my main fabric, I was able to do this using a tracing wheel. The oilcloth marks at the slightest touch, so I traced my line and then could easily follow the markings with my scissors. The lining fabric was much trickier to see the tracing on, so I mostly guessed the shape of the neckline based on the memory of the one I had just cut. I'll always be able to match them up at a later date. With that done, I only had about 30 seconds left, so I spent the rest of the time reading the next steps and tidying up. Okay, back to the present. This is my issue. Goodness knows how long I've been working already, probably 30 minutes, and I haven't even really started. I've just been organising. So I'm finally at the point where I think I can sort of press go on my timer and see how much actual stuff I get done. Now I've tried to set it up now so that I have all the bits ready to go. Now that I'm more familiar with it, I've still got to get my kit, I've got to find my scissors and all that sort of stuff, which I haven't got out. But I know which pieces are which now, and they're sort of laid out so I can find them easily again. So that hopefully I can sort of like walk past this and just be like, oh yeah, okay, I've got 20 minutes before I have to leave. Let me see if I can squeeze 20 minutes. But the first step, I don't know if you can see this little diagram here, is I have to trim the front pieces. So I've already cut the front pieces out and I have to trim the front pieces. Now, frustratingly, they don't fit on my table. And I think part of the reason why I abandoned this before was that it required me to get out my big cutting table. And cutting out of that table means that I have to stand up. I'm talking about at my parents' house this is. So I think that's why I got stuck at this point and nothing else ever happened on this project. I'm hoping that I can sort of turn them sideways on this table and do it. But we have a moment here where this could potentially all go wrong because it involves left and right hand side. And nobody ever understands this when I try and make my point about left and right side. So here we are, I have to trim the left side and I have to trim the right side, right? So they've labelled this as the right side, but when you look at it, that's on your left. So as I'm sat here now, the left is that, but it's labelled as the right hand side. And I know that that's because when I put it on the body, that's on the right hand side. But for me, in my dyslexic brain, I'm like, what? And they've got a little note here about, oh, right hand and left hand and right hand side, right? Yeah, and they're talking about getting confused with the right side of the garment. That's not what I'm getting confused about. I'm talking about, you're telling me that I have to trim the right hand side one to be the right length, but it's on the left of my table. That's where I get confused. So I need to concentrate, I need to find my scissors, I need to make this happen, and we need to press go on our 20-minute timer. Okay, here we go. Right hand placket cut line. The paper pattern pieces had the cutting lines for each of the fronts marked on, so I started by folding the paper along the first line, which was for the right hand side placket. With the placket section folded out of the way, I matched up the paper pattern with the cut edges of the fabric pieces and weighed it down with makeshift pattern weights in the form of coasters. With waterproof fabric, you can't use pins because any hole in the fabric will allow water to get in, and while I could have used clips, they were upstairs. I smoothed and aligned everything as best as I could and then started trimming away the section that would become the placket. So, this piece I have to keep. With the right side trimmed, I moved onto the left side, firstly making sure I had the piece in the right orientation so it would definitely end up being the left side, and then I refolded the pattern piece to trim off this tiny section along the front edge. I'm not entirely sure why the pattern designer chose to organise the cutting this way. It certainly was a very efficient use of fabric and it saved having multiple large pattern pieces, but it was a kind of annoying step, for me at least anyway. Sorry to all the people who hate the rustling. You're welcome to all the people who think it's ASMR. Can't please everybody in life, can you? I then repeated the same steps as for the right front, matching the paper piece to the fabric one, smoothing it out as best as I could, and then using the coasters cum pattern weights to hold the paper in place while I cut along the front edge. That small piece from the front edge is then discarded. It's only the wider piece cut off from the other pieces that is saved for later. I rolled the pattern pieces up with the paper pattern inside to hopefully keep everything nice and organised and to prevent more creasing. I need a pencil. One of Woody's. So 5 and 6, done. Woohoo! This is where I don't have any pins or clips or anything, so we might have to go upstairs. Match one of the side hood facings to the corresponding side hood lining. Side hood lining. Side hood facings. Thing is, it doesn't number them. Side hood facings, haha! Match one of the side hood facings to the corresponding side hood lining. With right sides together, ease the curve of the facing to the lining piece using the notches for placement and secure with clips/pins. Sew together, diagram C1. So it's going to end up like that. I struggled to make sense of the directions, so I do what I often do when I can't visualise it. Start with how I want it to look when it's finished and work backwards. Okay, pause in proceedings while I go to get the clips. Okay, clips. I also have been to get my curves because I can't remember what the seam allowance is on any of these pieces. I spent a long time trying to find out what the seam allowance was, but it didn't seem to be anywhere in the pattern. I felt like that was a massive oversight on the part of the designer, only to realise I was missing a page of the instructions. I found that page much later, and it did indeed have the seam allowance and lots of other useful information on. Whoops. Realising that I definitely didn't have enough time left in my 20 minutes to actually do any sewing, I decided to worry about the seam allowances later and just make a start on easing in the curves. It was quite difficult to ease these two fabrics into each other. The stiff and unyielding oilcloth and the drapey, loosely woven brushed cotton behaved so differently from each other, and only being able to use clips to prevent damaging the waterproof fabric didn't help. I definitely found it easier to have the lining side up and the main fabric on the bottom. Even then, it was still very fiddly. Okay, there's one. Again, let's have it. Flannel side up. Okay, so how long have I got left on my timer? Oh, 2 minutes. Oh my God, okay. So I'm not gonna have time to sew those today, but what's the next step? Can I do some more pinning? The next step was to join the back hood facing to the back hood lining. Basically, join a small rectangle of main fabric to a big rectangle of lining fabric. My only issue with this was that many of the rectangular pattern pieces have no paper pattern piece provided. You were only given measurements to cut them yourself. Great, really efficient pattern cutting, but when you end up with a bundle of rectangles and you're not sure which is which anymore, it gets confusing. And so I spent most of my remaining 2 minutes just trying to figure out which rectangles I needed. So, match the top short edge of the back hood lining to the lower long edge of the back hood facing with wrong sides together. Sew together and finger press the seam, set the hood pieces aside for now. Oh, okay, so I'll have gotten the hood pieces clipped in my first 20-minute session on this project. Well, my second 20-minute session, but my first in a long time. So I can go for my pile of batch sewing, as will that one. Oh, there it is. 20 minutes, time to stop. Well, all things considered, I think that was quite successful. I don't feel tired, but that's good because I'm supposed to stop before I feel tired. I feel a little bit frustrated to not be chugging along. Like my instinct, I'm sat here like, there's just some like more facing bits that could be clipped together and they'll only take like 2 seconds to do and there's only 2 clips or whatever. But I'm resisting that urge. I've left myself a note for tomorrow. So I've read ahead in the instructions to see what I need to do. So I've sort of can plan my batching a bit because I can't help myself. I'm batching my tasks together, largely because the sewing machine has to live upstairs. And so I'm trying to avoid trips up and down the stairs. So tomorrow, if I clip together the bits that need clipping together for the next couple of steps and then take everything to go and be sewn, that will probably be one 20-minute session. But I'm excited, you know, I'm excited and it's a little bit different. I'm not used to indie sewing pattern instructions anymore. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little project. There will definitely be more videos in this series coming as I try and finish it. Let's just hope I finish it in time for my holiday. Thanks for watching. See you next time.